you can begin to see that the demonic hypothesis has some merit, but the word demons, angels comes with theological baggage. And I think the real risk we have is that we've just been looking at what the phenomenon is and we're trying to characterize it. That's all based on data. And whereas the data and my hypotheses are flexible, theology is rigid. It is just what it is. And it gets forced through a lens. And unfortunately, the big story there probably isn't good enough to do justice to the complexities that we're seeing. So I'm really concerned about that.
There's a version of this subject that's all press conferences and congressional testimony and declassified PDFs. And then there's the version that asks why any of this matters, where it fits into what we think we know about God and death and the nature of reality. Jason Samosa has been pulling on those threads on his channel for longer than most people in this space have been paying attention. I wanted to explore what faith means to him and who the ultra-Christian Collins elite keeping this secret at the Pentagon really are. So at Contact in the Desert, Jason and I got a chance to sit down and talk. Welcome to the show. So who is Jason Samosa? Where did you grow up? What were you into? Tell me everything.
Yeah. Well, I am a human being, born in England, and I got interested in this topic many years ago. But just as I was getting into the topic, it got kind of hijacked by a journey of faith. I spent many years as an evangelical Christian, which is the last thing anyone ever expected me to become, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, when it happened, everybody who knew me was shocked. They thought I was joking. But I spent about 6 years really studying the Bible and learning pretty much everything there is to know about it. Because when you're a Christian, that is the source of truth.
Sure.
Like in UFO world, we're constantly trying to find sources of truth or verify. Could this be true? Can I trust this person? But for the Christian, that foundational work's already been done. You know where to find it. All you've got to do is study. And that's what I did for 6 years.
What was it that made you want to study it?
Well, I mean, as a Christian, that is the source of all truth. So for me, it was like, I just better get on with this.
Sure.
And I was training to become a minister, so I kind of was going to have to teach this to people, you know. So kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah.
But then, eventually lost my faith through a whole series of things that happened. And when that happened, many years later, UFOs, I was going to say appeared. It didn't look like I saw one. But, you start hearing about it. I remember hearing the Ariel school case, the Phoenix Lights, and just being astonished. Just being very aware that there's no easy way to explain these things. And that, to me, for some reason, was wonderful. This idea that there's this profound mystery that is unavoidable. I can't possibly doubt all of these people, but I also can't make any sense of what they're saying.
Sure.
And so it just felt like, okay, this is something I can get into. And now I exist in this UFO world, and I just get to dig in and, be curious. So, yeah.
It's really interesting to me that I grew up in a Catholic school, was never baptized, found it impenetrable, information-wise, story-wise, Whereas the UFO stuff to me, I'm like, I understand this, which is this big mystery where there are no answers, right? It's kind of funny that the thing that I couldn't understand was something that you're just like, yeah, I got this, and UFOs view of the mystery.
Yeah. I mean, I think Christianity can be complicated, especially when it's like Catholicism.
Sure.
It comes with so many literal bells and whistles and incense, and there's all of this stuff that makes it feel huge, intimidating, and it's not designed to be engaging.
Okay.
Whereas the one I was involved in was much more like, how do I speak to you as a human being?
Okay.
But looking at that contrast, by the way, between UFOs and religion, there are so many interesting things that you can draw there. Like I was thinking the other day about how people trust the Bible like it's the word of God, but you can't really know who wrote a lot of those books.
Right.
You can guess. We know Paul wrote some of them, but a lot of the things Paul wrote, he didn't really write, someone else did. The books of Genesis, where we get all these interesting stories about Nephilim, they weren't written by Moses. They were written by 4 different people, and it was changed.
I thought God wrote it as he was making the earth and the heavens, just like noting down.
Yeah. Actually, I was wrong. It was actually written by God. But it's interesting to me because that distance and the inability to know who wrote these things is huge. Whereas in UFO land, we don't have that issue.
Right.
There's a lot of things I can't verify, but I know that Philip J. Corso wrote a book.
Right.
I know who he was. I know he said some astonishing things, and I don't necessary to believe all of it, but I know who he was. I know he wrote that book, and it was only a few years ago. And guess what? A bunch of other people correlate what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so much easier for you to engage with this mystery because the people are still alive, a lot of them. And even the ones who aren't, they were interviewed ad nauseum.
Sure.
So it's tangible, it's real, and it's baffling. Whereas with Christianity, it's kind of closed off and buried in the distant past. It's still valuable. But to me, epistemologically, there's one that's way more authoritative.
Okay.
And I'm passionate about that as someone who's Christian who's into UFOs now, that there's a pecking order here in terms of data. Start with like what we can really verify and then integrate religion. Don't start with religion and then integrate UFOs, because epistemologically there's one that's superior. You didn't ask me that question.
No, I love it. Please go into this stuff.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, because religion and UFOs in some ways are like peanut butter and jelly, but in other ways are just so at odds with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an element of faith in both. And as someone that was never baptized and went through Catholic school, like I struggle with that all the time. Like I know Koso was alive, but I've got to take his word on faith alone.
Yes.
I can't check his mind and stuff like that. And it's the same with even people that are still alive now. Like talking to Lou Elizondo, I've got to take everything he's telling me on faith. And for me, it comes down to like sincerity and how much they believe. But again, even they're on faith, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's this inability to get to the heart of what's really going on. And like you said, even they, it's interesting. We always want to open up the curtain and look behind, and we assume those people know. And actually, they're going to have curtains they can't get beyond. And the people behind the final curtain are also going to probably, turn around and say, we don't really understand.
Right.
This whole series of things that you are hoping to discover. So it is, I think that the faith probably never ends. But that's also why this is so fun. Because, it would be disappointing. One of my worst traits is if someone was to disclose everything right now, I'd actually be upset. Because I want it. But I also would be sad because I get such a kick out of trying to piece everything together,
Yeah. And I guess if they disclose everything and suddenly you kind of know, oh, it's a species of XYZ from Zeta Reticuli. Yeah. Suddenly it's a biologist playground. It's not our playground anymore, right?
Yes, very true. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it would be for the betterment of society,
right?
But I'll just cry privately somewhere for a while.
Did you, when you moved away from religion, did you kind of stop believing in God, or did you see the presence of God in a different way?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I've always believed that there's something. I just don't think you can make sense out of all of this without there being something that caused things, whatever cause means. I mean, maybe space and time are artifacts of our minds, so cause breaks down. But, I definitely just believe that there's more.
Sure.
But it's a big blank canvas, and I sometimes speak to God and, I get something from that, but I don't know who that is or who they are, or, you know what I mean? There's a huge gap in knowledge, but it doesn't stop communication. It's just no longer kind of covered over with all of this other religious artifacts that come from the Bible. So yeah,
is praying for you do you picture talking to a guy in a chair, for example? I'll talk to the universe and I'll ask it for things, but like I say, I'm not coming from the place that it's God.
Yeah.
So what do you visualize when you pray? How do you?
I don't think I visualize anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm just talking.
You just talk you're talking to me right now. That's how you see it.
Yeah. I'm usually looking up, or I don't know. Yeah, it's sort of just general. And I, sometimes I wonder, is it us? Is it not us? I don't know. And I think it's okay not to know and to still, ultimately none of us know. And if that stopped us from engaging with our spirituality, then we'd all be really screwed.
Right.
You've got to stop. So yeah, just general open. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's a real. I remember there was a scene in. I really loved the book The Life of Pi. All about faith and stories and stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's a particular scene in it that just hit me square in the chest and stuck with me, where Pi as a boy is being shopped around these different places of worship so he can choose the religion he wants to follow. Mm-hmm. And he's just really frustrated and confused by this whole process. And one day he's in a marketplace and the rabbi and the priest and everyone, they come to him and they choose. Mm-hmm. And he looks at them and just says, I just want to love God.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a really powerful moment to like get
Yes.
past these institutions into the core of
Yes.
what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Actually, just recognizing that. I mean, also this comes to the UFO thing too. It's just all of this stuff between you and God. And Catholicism is particularly bad at it because it's not just that you have the Bible, you have all of this ceremony and all of this extra stuff. And even the way it's set up, you walk into a church and all the way down the other end is this sort of sanctuary which you can't even go in.
Sure.
It's all designed to convey distance. And it's the same with many religions. Like, there's all of this stuff. There's priests who intermediate between you, and then there's Jesus who intermediates between you and the Father. And then guess what? Mary's praying to Jesus to pray. It's all of that. And it's not just Christianity that does that. And it kind of creates this situation where we're so reliant on these systems, and it creates this sense of guilt and distance. And I'm not sure it's a positive thing.
Sure.
I think it's good for us to be humbled and to question who we are, but actually having the confidence to say, I know that I can connect with God is a wonderful thing, I think. It brings dignity. Yeah.
And you can kind of almost trace a line as well from that. You're saying that the priests are between us and God, the Pope is between us. And really that priest class kind of changed form, right? And it's still present, but in another way, the government is the thing between us and the truth.
Yes.
Kind of telling us what to believe. And it weeds me out.
That's so true. That system. And it's everywhere. I made a video recently where I talked a little bit about Aleister Crowley and about the age of Horus and the age of Osiris.
Sure.
And his description of it is this idea that the age of Osiris, which we're in, is all about these institutions where we look to them to help us. I need God to save me. I need the government to help me. I need the king because I'm a lowly peasant. And that's everywhere. Sure. It's also part of this huge capitalist system that we're a part of, where these structures, these layers are there. And for Crowley, despite all of his problems, of course, but I find the philosophy interesting. This idea that the age of Horus is about realizing that I'm okay.
Sure.
And actually this can work. I don't need all these systems and structures. And I find that fascinating. And it's interesting to look at disclosure through that lens, the way you put it just there. Should we be going to the government and saying, please give us the truth? Or is disclosure really, I actually had a conversation recently with Jesse Michaels about this, where he said it and it really hit me. He was like, disclosure is probably just going to be a personal journey.
Right.
And I was a bit annoyed when he said it. I was like, oh man, I was hoping to get into the weeds here.
Another journey of faith.
Yeah, come on, I'm overwhelmed. But it's like, actually, he's right. Actually, the truth probably is that we all just have to make that connection ourselves.
Sure.
I find it to be, pretty powerful.
I have a belief that there are two kinds of people in the world. People that have had weird things happen to them, and people that don't talk about them. Because you find, if you speak to someone, if you say, have you ever had a phone call that you knew who was at the other end before you picked up the phone? Most people are like, yeah, it's happened to me. Yeah. But they don't think of it as like a phenomena-related thing or a weird-related thing. They're just like, oh, that's odd. And they just put it away in their mind and carry on with their life.
Yes.
And then you get people like us that are like, whoa, everyone stop the presses. We need to figure out how this is working.
What was that? Yeah. I had a wild one recently, actually. It was about 6 months ago. I was thinking, got my YouTube channel. It's been doing well. I also had a full-time job.
Sure.
I was stressed trying to do both of these things. And I was asking myself, should I just quit? I tried to quit my job, and they said, just stick around a little bit. Let's talk about it.
Oh, I know that line.
Yeah.
I know that
Stuck
line.
Around for 6 months. But then the next day, my boss called me and he said, actually, Rob, we need you in DC. We've got some meetings with the government. And I was like, wow, this is exciting. I was trying to leave this job. Suddenly it just became very interesting. And we're going through and we're meeting with people, and I'm going to the offices of people I've made YouTube videos about, like Representative Ogles,
sure,
and Nancy Mace. Both had featured in UAP hearings, and I'm going to these offices, and I have to talk about cybersecurity, and I'm like, oh,
I want to talk about UFOs.
Yeah, I really do. But this is really interesting to like trying to quit my cyber job to talk about UFOs. My cyber job takes me to DC to meet the people who talk about UFOs. But guess what the legislation was called that we were talking about?
Go on.
The Samosa Act. I couldn't believe it. So I'm sitting there like, I can't talk to anyone about this stuff. And I just remember thinking, like, I've been asking the universe, like, what should I do? And I was like, I think I know what I'm supposed to be doing. So, yeah. Sometimes this stuff just hits you in the face, you know?
It really does. And there's that line, isn't there? Like, it's for people with eyes to see. But that kind of sounds like nonsense until you're sat in front of Nancy Mace and she shows you the Samosa Act. Okay, I can't ignore this.
It was really weird. Yeah. So I'm a believer in all that stuff. And I don't know who it was. Was it Hal Puthoff who talked about the importance of identifying those synchronicities and following? Like, that's a sign. And I don't have anything apart from Hal Puthoff's words to take on that. But it really stuck with me, this idea that maybe that's really key. It's a way that whoever is out there, communicates things to us that we need to understand. So, yeah.
That's interesting. It's really interesting. You said something so you've done a series recently on the Collins Elite that I find fascinating because it's just one of these things that gets trotted out in UFO world and no one really understands it. No one's looked into it. They're just kind of going, well, so-and-so said the Collins Elite exists and therefore there are Christians in the government that don't want this out.
Yeah.
No one's ever really done a deep dive like you did it. And we'll get into that in a second, but you said something that really resonated and stuck with me. And that was that ufology is flexible and theology is inflexible. And so they go together really well. Can you talk about that? About how, like, people may force those beliefs or
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting, this intersection that's happening because people are recognizing that the UFO phenomenon is complicated. The extraterrestrial hypothesis doesn't make sense of everything we're seeing. And so what happens is, rather than saying, oh, it's a mystery, we don't know what to call it yet, we're looking for categories, quite rightly. Ultra-terrestrial, interdimensional, the time-traveling hypothesis. And then there's the demonic hypothesis, which is compelling for a number of reasons. I mean, firstly, there's a correlation with the occult. It's absolutely there. The phenomenon appears to be deceptive as well.
Sure. The trickster stuff.
Yeah. And, also the hypothesis about how ancient experiences may also correlate with what we're currently seeing, which means that what you might have called demons may actually be the same thing.
Sure.
So all of this comes together, and here's the issue, is you can begin to see that the demonic hypothesis has some merit, but the word demons, angels, comes with theological baggage. And I think the real risk we have is that what happens is we've gone from the data here. We've just been looking at what the phenomenon is, and we're trying to characterize it. That's all based on data. But now I'm fusing my theology into here. And whereas the data and my hypotheses are flexible, theology is rigid. There are 66 books written by 40 people across 2,000 years, and they are not changing. It is just what it is. And so what happens is now, if I'm like, okay, the Bible's important here, it's uniquely important, suddenly all that information crushes the data, and it gets forced through a lens. And unfortunately, the big story there probably isn't good enough to do justice to the complexities that we're seeing. So, because I'm really concerned about that.
Yeah. It's a really interesting kind of place we find ourselves. Because like I said, this Collins Elite thing is coming into it. And so, faith and God and Catholicism, it's on everyone's tongue and on everyone's mind. And we've got congressional people saying it's demons and talking about the Book of Enoch. And, that's even looser than what you were saying about the books that were written 2,000 years ago. It wasn't written by Enoch. Luna literally said on Joe Rogan it was written by Enoch. It was not.
There's no way it was written by Enoch, but the sixth person ever to walk the earth. This is insane.
Yeah, it would change stuff.
And if you think about it, it makes no sense because the Bible's defined as those 66 books.
Right.
Okay, so that's what a Christian believes, is there's these books. And that's why you don't, for example, take, some of the Socratic dialogues and put them in there. They don't belong in the Bible.
Sure.
And Enoch's not in there either. So why are you paying attention? Why are you giving it significance? Surely, as it says in 2 Timothy, Scripture is sufficient for all good works. Right? That's what the Bible says about itself, although it's talking about scripture, whatever that means. But, it's like, so why is it now we're taking this other book, which is very interesting, but was actually written in 200 BC or something, and we're trying to fuse it in? Is the Bible no longer sufficient? So it raises further questions.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you're just looking at it like just a very interesting model through which to view what the phenomenon might be, great, fantastic. But you've got to remove all that theological baggage. And unfortunately, I don't think our society is going to be able to do it that well because people are going to go very quickly down a rabbit hole and it's going to reinterpret all the other data, which now is getting shaped through that theological lens.
Sure.
We're human beings. It's the way we are. So, I'll worry about that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I thought it was really interesting that you tackled the Collins Elite recently, because, like I said, it's on everyone's minds, and no one's really done it. And it has there's a point in one of the videos where you say, okay, I've got to take a half-hour detour now to kind of set something up, and I promise you it's going to pay off.
Yeah.
And you kind of essentially, paint a picture of secret societies are real. This is how they operate in the world. This one it was the family. There's a Netflix documentary about it. You're not talking out your ass and making stuff up about it.
Yeah.
And it made me think of, MK Ultra, Manhattan Project, COINTELPRO, and like all of these groups spring up, and they sound like conspiracy theories, but they're not. And the Collins Elite, I always thought, was just a group of people who were really religious that worked in the Pentagon and were like, this is how it is, stay away from it. But it's more than that, and you educated me. So give like a good overview for anyone watching this. Like, Collins Elite, where do they come from?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's so interesting. I've been fascinated by the first time I heard it. I was like, what the hell's that? Collins Elite. It was James Iandoli mentioned it. And I remember writing in the comments, I was like, something Collins. I didn't even write it well. And someone was like, no, Collins Elite. And then I got Nick Redfern's book.
Sure.
And that was the first bit of education is, like you said, the general sense is, okay, Louis Elizondo or John Alexander, whoever it is, has had some experience where these religious people have tried to stop them studying the phenomenon because they say it's demonic. And they use that to try and basically clamp down on UFO secrecy. Cool. Redfern's book paints a really rich picture. What it does is it talks about a program which was started in the late 40s, starting in the Air Force Office of Special Investigations and later coming out of the Pentagon, out of the Directorate of Plans, funding from the CIA. And it's a program, it sounds like a special access program before the term is being used. And it's essentially studying whether the phenomenon may have occult overlaps and how the occult works and how that might relate to the things that are seen.
Which is because that's like Crowley and Parsons, and that's what they're looking at. And they were all under a microscope, and it's only a stone's throw to L. and Hubbard from those guys at that time, right?
Yeah, there's the whole thing there where they're looking at all this stuff, and it's like, whoa, what are all these crazy people? And then one of them starts a UFO religion.
Right.
It's fascinating. But yeah, they're examining all of that, and they find the correlation is real, and at least this is what Redfern's sources told him. Fascinating. So program started in the 50s. And then I'm reading Vallee's most recent journals, Forbidden Science Volume 6. And there's all this information about the Collins Elite. And I'm like, wow, this is great. But it doesn't make any sense. Because I'm learning about, this guy, Alonzo McDonald, who, was the CEO of McKinsey, a consulting organization, and was also a chief of staff for Jimmy Carter. And he's like,
crazy.
It's fascinating. But Vallee was like, that guy's in the Collins Elite. And I'm like, what? The guy works for McKinsey. He's a staff director. What's he doing in this occult sap?
Sure.
It doesn't make any sense. And then I start looking more broadly, and the family comes up. And I begin to realize a lot of the different characters associated with the Collins Elite are tied to that family network.
Okay.
And they've sat in on UFO briefings, some of them from like the National Security Council, some of them from the Collins Elite themselves, who've briefed presidents. And like James Baker and Alonzo McDonald are two examples of staff directors for Reagan and Carter who both got UFO briefings, but are both part of this family network. And they're also pushing for this secrecy.
Yeah, sure.
So you've got a huge Christian network here in government, which is called the family. You've got this program, but then there's a third component where Vallee talks about Fordham University. And this was so annoying because I was like, I finally figured this out. And then he's like, there's been some emails between me and my colleagues, and the conversation is leading towards Fordham University. The Collins Elite may have originated from there in the 70s. And I'm like, okay, there's the program which starts in the 50s, and then there's this evangelical network. And now you're telling me it started in a Catholic university in the 70s. And I'm just like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And then I just opened that up, and I just looked from every angle I could. And effectively, it makes a lot of sense for multiple reasons. Firstly, the Catholic Church has always characterized the phenomenon in terms that is helpful to itself.
Okay.
You can go back to Fatima, where, turns out that the silvery disk in the sky was really the sun.
Sure.
Right? They sort of forced that in there. You can look at the witches' Sabbaths, where people were effectively having abduction experiences, but it was demons.
Okay.
And, these were witches, not people being abducted. You can look at who was the flying saint? Cupertino.
Oh, yeah.
Joseph Cupertino, a saint is, he's praying and fasting, and miracle starts to happen, which is so well attested. There's so much so many people testify. This guy was levitating. And what they did is they just locked him away. And it was like, okay, like this is very complex stuff that the Catholic Church is engaging with. But what they give you is a very thinned down theological way to view it, which is angels and demons, good people and bad people. It was the sun, it wasn't a UFO. Everything gets flattened. And it just so happens that, I would suspect that given how powerful Catholics have been in government, the senior posts that they've held, how much they already understood about the UFO issue, the demonic hypothesis is perfect to spread. This whole Collins elite theory that it's satanic and you shouldn't study it, it's great because it ends the conversation. It stops the revolution. And the Catholic Church has been trying to avoid revolutions for its entire existence. Political, scientific, philosophical, and this is the ultimate revolution, the realization that your theology isn't sufficient, that your traditions may be outgrown, and there's something new that's bigger and more tangible than the miracles from 2,000 years ago that you're depicting. So it makes sense to me, but the ultimate thing was realizing that it was a devout Catholic who ran the Air Force Office of Special Investigations when the whole Collins Elite project started.
Oh my God.
And so it all kind of ties together. You've got these three different elements, but they're all kind of mutually reinforcing and there's connections between them. But the most important thing here is this. A phrase like the Collins Elite gets thrown around by people here at this conference will talk about it, and they'll use it to describe, a certain thing. But I don't think that they're comfortable going into that next level of detail and describing it fully.
Sure.
Because, it's sensitive, and I think the Collins Elite have done some pretty radical stuff. They can be quite dangerous. So you hear Collins Elite, but it turns out under the surface, there's like three components to it. Maybe there's a fourth.
Yeah, right.
Maybe, actually, it's the wildest thing in Vallee's journals. The Collins Elite were involved in the TRW reverse engineering program in the 70s.
What?
According to one of his witnesses, a lady that he testifies actually worked at Area 51. She worked in the TRW reverse engineering program called Zodiac. We've all heard of Zodiac.
Yeah.
The Collins Elite were in there in 1970s. So it makes you wonder, how much access do these guys have?
Yeah.
They're not just doing the theology here. They're also studying the phenomenon. And they're telling you not to study it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which suggests there's something that we would find, positive, like derived from it and by studying it.
Yeah.
And I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I can add something else to
Go
that.
on, go for it.
There's one thing that comes from that passage as well is she then says to him, you're right about the phenomenon. There's a nuts and bolts aspect. But the other thing we discovered is there is a vast control system that is manipulating religious ideologies. So you think about that. That's what she learned from her experiences, presumably on that program. And the Collins Elite surely then will also be aware that the UFO phenomenon is manipulating religious ideologies, which would undermine the theology that they're using for UFO secrecy. So, it brings up this whole question of the real threat here for them is if disclosure happens and we get to do the science, all those old mythologies don't make sense anymore because we found the thing that was generating them. So I think that's, very, very compelling reason for them not to allow this conversation.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, like religion's all well and good until God shows up.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, you're not meant to be real.
Yeah. You're going to start saying things. Religion.
Don't save people. We need them to pay insurance.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's too dangerous.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the cargo cults thing.
Right.
Along where he went into Lockheed Martin and, his thesis with the vendor was cargo cults, which is effectively, phenomenon appears and then it leads us to create these mythologies. And it's fascinating to see how all of that stuff lines up with, again, the esoteric. Jim Ryder from Lockheed Martin gave really interesting talks. And he's obviously very aware of the UFO issue. He was involved in trying to offload the materials, right? And then he goes and gives a talk at the Lucius Trust, which used to be called the Lucifer Trust, which is connected to a whole esoteric tradition, which is the esoteric tradition, which is basically saying traditional religion hasn't quite got it right. And actually, there's this more Gnostic way to look at things.
Sure.
It may be that, the figure from the garden in that mythology could be viewed a different way. And it's very it's just so interesting to me how I really see these two worlds where you've got these people who want to stick to that old power of religion and the mythologies we've got. And there's this esoteric tradition, which is saying, hey, disclosure may be about more than just UFOs. It might be this huge discovery about a whole history and it's philosophical, you know?
And the UFO stuff, it blows my mind because you always end up in philosophy because it comes down to belief, faith, how we think about thinking and how we think about experience and things.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it forces us to look at the immeasurable, or at least what we haven't measured yet, right? We had that schism where it was like, okay, we're going to measure atoms. We can do that. That's fine. But when we talk about the soul, can we measure it? That's a faith thing, you just got to believe that you have it.
Yeah, that's interesting, man.
Yeah. Okay, give me a second.
Yeah, cool.
That's so fascinating. The stuff with the family really weirds me out because it's in your video you include footage, seeing these people interacting with presidents and things like that. And when you hear about it, you just think this sounds like some kind of TV show, where we're puppeting the people that we think are in charge of the world.
Yes.
There's actually like another layer behind it.
Yes.
And in a strange way, it would make sense. Religion's very old. The institution's very old.
Yeah.
Money is very old.
Yes.
So it would make sense to me that the truth of this would be held within like a religious, financial kind of juggernaut that kind of says, no, it's for us. And we're keeping this away from the rest of you for whatever reason.
Yes. Yeah, I do think that. I think, on the puppet thing, there's every presidential cabinet has people in it who basically, it's like a board of a company where they represent other interests. The Council of Foreign Relations always has a person.
Sure.
There's often someone from the family, someone from elite Catholic background. There are all these people that basically interface with other organizations to have a seat at the table. And, like you said, there's then, I think, the religious component, the CFR, ultimately blends into one thing.
Okay.
It's all conservative. And I don't mean that like it's the Republicans' fault, it's the conservatives. I mean that it's like all of these different people benefit from the status quo.
Sure.
Business doesn't want instability. All they want is more business.
Yeah.
And revolution threatens that. So keeping things as they are, stable, protects the existing power. I mean, what sucks is like when I got into UFOs, I was really hoping I wouldn't go down end up believing all the old conspiracies. But frankly, the transnational financial oil power thing, I think it's just real. And I think it's been real before World War II for over 100 years. Money drives the world. And there are certain families who have been instrumental in the history of intelligence at pivotal points in terms of the UFO phenomenon. And frankly, I think they're responsible for the cover-up and they weaponize religion.
Sure.
I don't think they believe it. Even recently, Peter Thiel talking about the Antichrist. And I don't see him as part of that transnational financial elite, by the way. He's sort of a new god. It's slightly different. But, he's warning about the Antichrist. He's saying we have to do what we can to preserve the current state of things. We can't allow the end times to progress and the apocalypse to come because then the Antichrist will come. And I'm like, okay, well, firstly, why do you believe in an Antichrist? Seriously, which book of the Bible? Why? But then there's another really interesting thing, which is, he's the head of Palantir.
Yeah.
He's the chairman of the board, I think, and, has been supporting things happening in the Middle East,
right,
which frankly can be described as fulfilling biblical prophecy.
Right.
So I'm like, if you're so worried that we're going to trigger the end times, why are you doing all that stuff over there?
Yeah.
And it just makes me think that all of this going around talking about the Antichrist has some other motivation. To me, I think a lot of these folks see the power of religion and especially apocalyptic narratives because of urgency. I always like to say this, if I tell you dinner's going to be ready in 5 minutes, there's very little chance you're going to go to the fridge. If I tell you the end times are coming, a lot of your behaviors change. And as a society, we believe something's on its way, maybe the Antichrist is going to come. The word apocalypse is in our nomenclature. Our ability to make decisions and to think clearly changes.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very powerful weapon. I don't know what it's for. And I also would be happy for someone to prove to me that these people are genuinely religious. They believe this. But I'm suspicious. Yeah.
I think it's reasonable to be suspicious because no one does anything if there's nothing to gain, right?
Yeah, man.
And each of us kind of carry a responsibility in the world in the sense of like how we look at it. Peter Thiel is looking at it in a specific way. Elon Musk looks at it in a specific way. I do. You do, right? But I'm really curious that when you look out at the world with your lens and the journey you've gone through, What do you think it means to be a human being?
Oh man, what a great question. That's great. Yeah, I think I think we're overdue evolution, and I think we've been pushing on it for a while. I think human beings have been evolving, and I think in some ways we're probably a pretty messed up species. I think probably because something came here and we're a bit of a mix of this and a mix of that, which may be why we're inherently a bit unstable. But I think that there's a trajectory, and it's a trajectory of evolution. And I think, we're in America 250 years ago, something magical happened here where people tried to create a government based on principles of freedom and equality and liberty and the freedom of thought and expression. I think we were on a journey of serious evolution at that point. And I think it got halted by the people who want to protect the status quo, because it might be that the next stages of evolution damage existing systems. So I see being a human being as being part of this journey, and it's somehow about collectively pushing on to the next thing, recognizing that this isn't good enough. And I don't know whether the UFOs are good things, bad things. I tend to veer towards the latter. But at the very least, they force you to think outside of your existing system. And I think we need that. So I hope that somehow it's part of a grand plan. Yeah.
Plan, sir. Thank you, man. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for talking to me. And thank you for your incredible videos. Keep making them. And keep
thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. Dude, you're an original inspiration for me. So it's awesome to be here.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Spotify or on your chosen platform. If you could like, share, or subscribe, that would be very much appreciated. It helps us find our tribe. If you'd like to support the show and get access to a 1-hour live chat each month and early ad-free access, you can find us at Patreon. Just follow the link in the show notes or at our website, tobehumanshow.com. And feel free to reach out via the contact page or email at hello@tobehumanshow.com. As always, remember to be curious. The universe is bigger than we know.
What It Means to Be Human is a double-barrel production. This week's episode was produced by Roz Mugford and Dan Zetterstrom. Sound post-production by Parker Mosley with technical support from Dale Mugford. Our theme music is by Thunderbird.